Hi, everybody. Welcome to our August Tech Bite. Today's topic is going to be about Zero Trust Network Architecture, or ZTNA, as you'll hear it discussed a lot. The reason that I kind of decided to do like a whiteboarding session on this was because I got some feedback from the previous call when I did the internet access side of Harmony SASE, and people were asking, when I mentioned I was probably going to do the private access next, um, what is ZTNA? And I'm not super familiar with it, and I've heard the term, but I'm not really strong with my understanding of it. So, um, based on that, I figured it would make a lot of sense to do a quick session, and I think this one's going to be quicker than our normal tech bites, but do a quick session about this is what ZTNA is. What does this word mean, or phrase mean, and why do we need this? Right? Because if we don't know why we need this, then we probably don't, really need to spend a lot of time talking about, demoing private access. So let's jump into my first whiteboard that I've ever done on Zoom, and let's hope it works out nice. Okay. So in the beginning, in the beginning, there was the office, right? Headquarters. And it was good. No, so headquarters, right? And back in the day, everything was contained in your headquarters, right? So we had all of our users were there. Let's make this nice and small, right? All our users were there, and we had servers there with all of our nice data, and all our applications were there in the servers, and we had everything there, and everything was inside, and it was all stuck behind. Let's do this. It's all sitting behind a nice fancy firewall, right? Red for fire. And everything was great, right? But times changed. And a lot of us went ahead and built out, make this big again, data centers, because we had all this data, all this info, all this infrastructure, all these applications that we had to have space for, right? So we built the data center and we moved the servers over to here, right? But that meant that we had to connect these things somehow, right? The users at HQ had to get to the data on the servers. So we put a gateway here and a gateway that already existed here, and we made a VPN, right? Simple enough. Let's choose dashes. Dashes. There we go, dashes. We made a VPN, or we did MPLS if you fancy like that. Simple enough, right? We have a site-to-site VPN. We're all familiar with this, but more things changed, right? We started to develop branch offices, right? You got some branch offices. We're gonna put them down low, I think, just because they're gonna mess up my graphics here if I don't. Branch, and you know what? You got more than one branch. So let's see. Let's duplicate that. You got some branches. Oop, shrunk that guy too much. Put him here and him here. Now we got the same problem, but perhaps double, right? Because we got to get, certainly these guys got to get back to this data center, right? The branches, they got to get back to the data center. And as you see from our red lines that I'm keeping, our red outlines, I should say, we still need a gateway, right? So we're up to 4 gateways already, right? And we all got these VPNs. And then you start wondering about, oh, well, does these guys have to reach out to HQ? Maybe the user's got to get there directly somehow. Okay, we got to make a VPN here. And yep, go ahead. And we got to make a VPN here. Okay, good. Another VPN. Yeah, all right. Good. Okay, we got all our site-to-site VPNs. We got all this mixture going on, right? And this is not so much the hub and spoke style. This is like the mesh style, right? Um, so we got our VPNs, right? Then we put stuff up in, and look at this. We got our own little shape for the cloud, right? And we got this hybrid DC, right? So cloud DC, right? Okay, well, let's begin again. Some more VPNs. I think we see where I'm going with this. So we'll just do these two and not all the other guys, but all the other guys probably need one. Okay, so we got that going, right? And we do need some kind of gateway perimeter technology here too, right? Um, then, and especially in the last 5 years, our users started going remote, right? So now we got, I'll use circles, smaller circles, uh, work from home, right? And we probably got dozens of those, but I don't necessarily need to make separate pictures for them. But these guys don't have gateways. You're not going to buy a gateway for somebody's house. So they got to use some kind of endpoint client, right? Or something, which means you may or may not have to buy infrastructure to create these tunnels. And they're certainly going to need to go here to the DC. And they're certainly going to need to go to the cloud, right? To the cloud. Very nice. And they're probably going to have to go to some of these branches, but we're just going to calm down with that with the lines, right? But we see that this becomes this big spider web of VPNs all over the place, and it's a little bit of work to maintain it. You have to make sure one has connectivity to the other, that this site has connectivity to that person has connectivity to the other site. Oh, I forgot one more thing. I'm glad I remembered it. Important thing. The other thing that we've introduced, right? We'll make them a hexagon. Why not? The other thing we've introduced is we're going to call temporary users. Things like contractors, right? That we need them in there for a little while, but then they get out. Now they, unlike all our friends here with this red outline, I don't know what security they have. Maybe they don't have any at all, right? We have no idea. But they too need VPN access to our cloud, right? They're working in our cloud to help us do some kind of development. And they need access to our data center to grab some of our apps. And here's some more VPNs. All right, hooray. So we see this gets complex. We see we now have these other users that I'm going to get into more into this as we go, right? But we'll go. But so that's kind of what happened and grew over time. I Are there any questions on this? I don't think there will be. But I'll hold 1 second. I'm looking at the chat. Looking at the Q&A. I'm looking if anybody wants to raise their hand, they could do that too. Okay. Looks good. All right. So the other problem we got with this, if you think about it, and those are familiar with VPN will kind of understand. When you land on a VPN, right? When you connect successfully to VPN, you have access to the entire subnet, right? Whatever you're sitting on. And depending on how you have your networks configured, it could be everything in the whole network, right? And you can do scanning, you can do Nmap or something to see other devices, to learn their IPs, to scan them for vulnerabilities. You can start to exploit those if you're so inclined. You also might just be somebody that says, like I don't know what this server is, but let me log into it and see what kind of data is sitting on it because I'm bored or whatever. So that there's a lot of exposure. And again, now you got these temp users hanging out. We don't really know much about them other than, hey, I hired them to do a specific job, but they've got access to every single thing in my cloud and every single thing in my DC. And if they had a VPN here, everything inside of my HQ. So that's kind of where the zero trust starts, right? That's full trust, right? With VPN, i.e., once you're on VPN, we trust you entirely. So I'm actually just going to scroll down and we're going to make a new one real quick. I wonder if I can copy this whole thing. Pointer tool. Can I do like this? Duplicate. Oh wow. Just gotta move it now. One down. Wow, that's awesome. Okay, so let's go ahead now. Get out of there. Let's erase all this, and I may have to move this around just a little bit to make it a little bit better. Move this one over here, and I'm gonna leave. I guess that's good. Okay, cool. So these guys got to go back in the HQ where they belong. So we got all these things still, right? What we've introduced is checkpoints, Harmony SASE, right? And other companies are doing this too, the zero trust architecture, a gateway that we provide out there in the cloud. So I'm going to use the cloud again, and I'll make the outline purple because checkpoints pink and purple. Check, we'll just call this the SASE gateway, right? Because I won't even use checkpoint. Could be somebody else's architecture. In here, we have now a gateway that can set policy and set rules and base the rules on specific users, specific services, etc. Right? So what we can do is set rules that say, well, let's back up 1 second. So we set the rules. The connections to this now can be done through your existing firewalls, right, or your existing routers. We connect through a lot of different machines. We even have a connector you can download and just install on a VM if you need, if you don't have any machines that are compatible or VMs. But essentially what we do is we create, and this is important, so I'm going to do the arrows. We create outbound connections from these places, right? And why is that important that it's outbound? Because it's not listening, right? It's not sitting there waiting for, hey, uh, what's trying to ping me? Is somebody trying to break through my VPN? We saw a rash in the beginning of this year of vulnerabilities in VPN technology with a variety of vendors. This is an outbound tunnel, right? Which means that it's not sitting there listening, and it's not going to, accept connections from anything other than that SASE gateway, right? So now that we've established this network, we can use this gateway to restrict access to different services and different locations, right? So, for example, if we have 10 applications in the DC, our zero trust or least privilege, as you may be familiar with that term, we could say you have access to the SQL database because that's what you need to do, Mr. User. But you don't have access to remote desktop. You don't have access to our infrastructure. You don't have access to our web server. All those things are not necessary for your role. And we can build roles so that we can apply the same role to multiple users, right? So that's where the zero trust comes in, right? And it's important to understand that this is kind of a newer way. The other thing is we do this without putting firewalls in all these locations, right? I mean, you probably have one already, so that can create the tunnel to here, or we can use a router if there's a router in these locations, or we can use even our own connector VM that we make. And then also that we can put these gateways in many different locations. We have POPs, which stands for point of presence, and I actually kept the admin guide open, which I realize you can't see right now. I think, let me see if I can I'm afraid to close this. I'll show you the list of POPs at the end, just I just don't want to lose it. Okay, so we got that. So the other thing we got is our temp users and our work from home people, right? We can install a client on these guys, right? Tiny little agent. And again, the client connects them here to the SASE gateway. And then the rules are enforced and they can go wherever place it is that they're supposed to go and only to the locations and services that they are allowed and supposed to go to, right? Because again, zero trust. We don't trust them for anything other than their explicitly stated purpose. Our temp users, right? Our contractors, and ask Target about, HVAC contractors and how that can work out for you as an example. And then they're only the big example. I'm sure there's 1,000 of them. These guys can get the access to the gateway, right? They don't have to put an agent. You can offer up certain services like SQL and RDP, et cetera. You can offer up certain services clientlessly through this gateway, which is really cool. However, we still got one problem, right? These users, the work from home people, they're on your machines. Hopefully, maybe they're not, and then they're going to kind of fall under this category. But if they're on your machines, you have your endpoint client, your multi-factor, force multi-factor, your full disk encryption, your whatever thing it is, your group policy that protects and strengthens these machines and makes them hardened against attack and intrusion, etc. But these temp users, you really don't know, right? You don't know what they're doing with their machines. And are they really secure? Because if someone has hacked into this machine, this person's laptop, then they can get in here and use at least the services. You have cut down on the attack service immensely, right? Because if they get hacked and they get in, the only thing that the hacker can access is whatever this temp user is specifically, explicitly allowed to do, right? So we've already cut down the attack service greatly because with VPN, they just be allowed in. And hey, scan this whole cloud DC, scan this whole on-prem DC, figure out what's in there. But there is another thing we can do. We can do posture checks. And we can literally check a handful, not a handful, probably about a dozen different things, right? We could check to see when's the last time they updated Windows. Do they have an antivirus on there? When's the last time that antivirus was updated? Do they have specific processes running, either that we require them to have or that we ban? Do they have specific registry keys that we require or ban? A few other things like that. But we'll have the posture check and we can run it continuously, right? It doesn't have to be just when they sign on. It can be done every 20 minutes. But we have the posture check, which again gives us the warm fuzzies, the safety feeling that these guys have a reasonably secure machine and I'm not as worried about them accessing my network and my DCs, etc. So that is my whiteboard on ZTNA. And I'm wondering if we have any questions. I'm wondering if this was helpful to understand what ZTNA is and what it means. And when you see it, you kind of be like, oh, I know zero trust architecture. It's, a least privilege approach to remote access and to different things, right? So I'm going to check the chat. I don't see any hands raised. Let's see for one more minute. While I'm waiting for questions, I will show you now. I'll close the whiteboard. I will show you now the in the admin guide, the POPs. Remember I said I'd show that. So literally we have these points of presence, right? And you can have one SASE gateway or multiple gateways, which the policy is replicated in, but across multiple regions. And you see all these regions we got here, quite a few. So if you have a significant number of users in New York, you could put one in New York. If you have an additional group of many people in, California, you could put it in San Francisco or Los Angeles. If you have a whole bunch of people hanging out in London and Mumbai and Sao Paulo, you can put those POPs in those, or sorry, put your gateways in those points of presence as well and have minimal latency. So that's what I wanted to show with the POPs. So any other questions? Let me look one more time in the chat. Pretty empty. Uh, okay. All right. Well, I hope that this was a helpful session. I hope that, we kind of raised some topics people might not be super familiar with, and that maybe we're one step closer to being familiar with now. Any questions from this, of course, hit me up. Any topics that you may want to see, hit me up, please. I will most likely be doing the Harmony SASE remote access as a demo next time. So we're going to build on the knowledge we discussed today. Um, yeah. So thank you so much for attending the Tech Bite, and I hope you have a great month. Thank you.